Jake's dating Sarah from my office, all because I made one comment about his confidence. But what happened next will shock you. He did it right in front of everyone at our company party. Picture this. I'm standing there in my red dress looking absolutely stunning when I see them together by the bar. She's got her hand on his chest and he's actually smiling. Not that fake smile he's been giving me for months, but a real one. I march over there ready to drag him away when he looks me dead in the eye and says, "Jessica, meet my girlfriend Sarah." My girlfriend. Like I don't even exist anymore. Sarah just stands there with this smug little smile, and I swear she pressed herself closer to him. The entire marketing department was watching. Linda from HR had her mouth hanging open. Even the janitor stopped mopping to stare. I felt my face burning red, and all I could think was how dare he humiliate me like this in front of everyone I work with. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started, because none of this makes any sense. My name's Jessica, I'm 29, and I've been working in marketing for this tech company for 3 years. I met Jake on Bumble about 8 months ago. He's 31, works as a graphic designer for some startup downtown, and honestly, he seemed perfect at first. Good job, his own apartment, decent car, everything you want in a guy. Our first date was at this cute little coffee shop on 5th Street. We talked for hours about everything, movies, travel, work drama. He paid for both our drinks without me even asking, which was refreshing after dating so many cheap guys. When he walked me to my car, he gave me this sweet little kiss on the cheek and asked if he could see me again. The second date was dinner at Romano's, this Italian place I love. That's when I first mentioned Mark, my ex-boyfriend. Not in a mean way or anything, just casual conversation. Jake had ordered the chicken parmesan, and I said, "Oh, my ex-Mark used to get that all the time. He was obsessed with their sauce." Jake just nodded and smiled, seemed totally fine with it. We kept seeing each other, and everything was going great. After about 6 weeks, we became intimate for the first time. Now look, I'm not trying to be mean here, but I have to be honest about what happened. When things got physical, I noticed he was different from what I was used to with Mark. Not dramatically different, just noticeably so. I didn't say anything that night because I'm not heartless, but it was definitely something I noticed. A few days later, we were lying in bed, and he asked me if everything was okay, because I seemed distant. I thought about lying, but I've always believed honesty is the foundation of any good relationship. So I gently told him, "Jake, you know I care about you so much and I want us to work. It's just that physically you're quite different from what I'm used to. Mark was more confident in that area, but that doesn't mean we can't make this work." He got this weird look on his face and said, "What do you mean confident?" I tried to explain it delicately. I said, "Look, every woman has preferences, right? Some like tall guys, some like muscular guys. I happen to prefer men who are more self-assured physically. It's not your fault you're built differently, but I thought we should talk about it openly instead of pretending I don't notice." Jake sat up in bed and said, "Are you seriously comparing my body to your ex's right now?" He sounded so angry, which honestly shocked me. I told him, "I'm not comparing, I'm just being honest about my experience. Mark was more naturally gifted in that department. You're more on the modest side. Those are just facts, not judgments." He got up and started getting dressed. I asked where he was going, and he said he needed some air. I told him, "Jake, don't be insecure about this. There are ways to work around it. We could try different positions, or there are toys that can help. I'm trying to be supportive here." He just looked at me like I'd slapped him and left. He didn't call me for 3 days. When he finally texted, it was just, "Can we talk?" We met for coffee and he seemed really upset. He said, "Jessica, what you said the other night really hurt me. I can't stop thinking about it." I felt terrible that I'd hurt his feelings when I was just trying to be open and honest. I said, "Jake, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to communicate about our relationship like adults do." Things were okay for a while after that. We went back to our normal routine of dinner dates and weekend hangouts, but I started noticing Jake seemed less confident in bed. He would ask me constantly if I was enjoying myself, if it felt good, if I was satisfied. It was actually kind of annoying because it made everything feel so forced and awkward. About a month later, we were out with my friends at this bar downtown. I'd been drinking wine and feeling relaxed when the conversation turned to relationships. My friend Maya was complaining about her boyfriend's lack of ambition, and I said, "At least he's probably good in bed. Jake here is sweet, but let's just say good things come in small packages, right, Jake?" I nudged him playfully, and everyone laughed. Jake's face went bright red, and he excused himself to go to the bathroom. Maya said, "Oh my God, Jessica, that was brutal." I was confused because I thought I was being affectionate and teasing. When Jake came back, he was quiet for the rest of the night. In the car on the way home, he said, "I can't believe you said that in front of your friends." I said, "Jake, it was just a joke. Everyone makes jokes about their relationships. Maya's always complaining about her boyfriend's gaming addiction. Sarah talks about how her husband leaves dishes everywhere. I was just being playful." He said, "But you made a joke about something really personal and embarrassing." I told him, "If you're that insecure about it, maybe you should work on your confidence instead of getting mad at me for being honest." Things started getting tense between us after that. Jake became really withdrawn and stopped initiating sex. When I would try to start something, he'd make excuses about being tired or stressed from work. I started feeling like he was punishing me for being honest with him. One night I was at my friend Linda's house for wine night with the girls. We were talking about relationships, and I ended up venting about the situation with Jake. I said, "I don't know what to do. I tried to have an honest conversation about our physical compatibility, and now he's acting like I committed some crime. All I did was mention that my ex was bigger, and suddenly I'm the villain." My friend Kate said, "How much bigger are we talking?" And I said, "Mark was like 8 inches. Jake's probably 5. It's a pretty significant difference." Linda said, "Oh wow, that is a big difference. No wonder you're frustrated." I felt validated that my friends understood where I was coming from. The problem was, I didn't realize Jake was friends with Linda's boyfriend Mike until Mike apparently told Jake what I'd said. Jake confronted me about it the next day. He said, "So now you're telling all your friends about our private life?" I said, "Jake, I was just talking to my girlfriends. That's what women do. We talk about our relationships." He said, "You told them exact measurements, Jessica. You gave them specific details about something really personal." I said, "I was venting to my support system." "You talk to your friends about relationship stuff too." He said, "I don't tell my friends about your body or compare you to my exes." I said, "That's because men don't communicate the way women do. We're more open about these things." The fighting got worse over the next few weeks. Jake started saying I was being cruel and manipulative, which was completely unfair. I was trying to help our relationship by being honest about our problems. Every time I tried to give him constructive feedback about our physical relationship, he would accuse me of being mean. Things came to a head at his company's holiday party in December. We were at this fancy hotel ballroom, and I'd gotten a new dress for the occasion. Jake introduced me to his coworkers, including this girl, Sarah, from accounting. She was pretty in a basic way. Blonde, petite, probably a B cup. Nothing special but pleasant enough. We were all standing around talking, and Jake's boss mentioned something about how Mark Zuckerberg had grown Facebook from nothing. Without thinking, I said, "Speaking of Mark, my ex Mark had such an entrepreneurial spirit too. He started his own consulting firm and was making 6 figures by the time he was 30. Some men just have that big energy, you know?" I glanced at Jake meaningfully. Jake's face went red and he said, "Jessica, can we get some air?" I said, "What?" I was just making conversation. His boss looked confused and Sarah was staring at us. Jake grabbed my arm and walked me out to the hallway. He said, "What the hell was that about?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I was just contributing to the conversation. He said, "You brought up Mark again and made some comment about big energy while looking right at me. In front of my boss." I said, "Jake, you're being paranoid. I was talking about business energy, entrepreneurial spirit. You're the one making it weird. He said, you know exactly what you were doing. When we got home that night, Jake said, we need to talk. I said, if this is about the Mark comment again, you're being ridiculous. He said, Jessica, you humiliated me in front of my entire office. I said, I mentioned my ex's business success. How is that humiliating you? He said, because you do this constantly. You bring up Mark whenever you want to make me feel small. I said, that's not true. I bring up Mark when he's relevant to the conversation. He was successful, he was generous, he was well endowed. Those are just facts about my past relationship. Jake said, do you hear yourself right now? You just listed his dick size as one of his positive qualities while talking about how I supposedly make you feel bad. I said, I'm just being honest about my experience. Jake said, your honesty feels a lot like cruelty, Jessica. I said, so now I'm cruel for having standards and being open about them. Maybe if you spent less time feeling sorry for yourself and more time trying to improve our relationship, we wouldn't have these problems. He said, how exactly am I supposed to improve the size of my dick, Jessica? Jake went quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think I need some space to think about things. I said, what kind of space? He said, I'm going to stay at my friend Ryan's place for a while. I said, that seems like an overreaction to one conversation. He said, it's not one conversation, Jessica. It's months of conversations where you make me feel like I'm not enough. He left that night and didn't answer my texts for days. When he finally called, he said he needed more time to think. After 2 weeks of barely talking, Jake finally agreed to meet me for coffee. He looked tired and seemed distant. I said, Jake, I've missed you so much. Can we please work this out? He said, I've been doing a lot of thinking, Jessica. He said, I don't think you understand how much your comments have affected me. I said, Jake, I never meant to hurt your feelings. I was just trying to be open about our relationship. He said, but you keep doing it. Even when I ask you to stop, you find ways to bring up Mark or make comments about my body. Jake said, I can't do this anymore, Jessica. I said, what do you mean? He said, I can't be in a relationship where I constantly feel like I'm being measured against someone else and coming up short. I said, every relationship has challenges. We can work through this if we both try. He said, you don't seem to think there's anything wrong with what you're doing. You think I'm just being insecure. I said, aren't you? I mean, I'm with you because I want to be with you. Why can't you just focus on that instead of feeling threatened by my past? That was 3 months ago. I thought he'd come around, but he started dating Sarah from his office. I found out through Instagram. She posted a picture at some restaurant with best date night ever with this amazing man. I felt sick. Sarah was everything I wasn't. Boring, basic, the kind of girl who gets excited about farmers markets. I couldn't understand what he saw in someone so ordinary. Last week was our company's annual holiday party. It was held at the same hotel where Jake's company had their party last year. I'd bought a new black dress for the occasion and spent extra time on my hair and makeup. I wanted to look amazing, partly for me and partly because I knew Sarah would be there. I was having a good time when I saw them walk in together. Jake was wearing a navy suit that looked expensive. Sarah was in a simple red dress, but she looked annoyingly radiant. They were holding hands and smiling, clearly comfortable with each other. They ended up at the bar right next to where I was standing. I could hear their conversation clearly. Sarah was telling Jake about some volunteer work she did with animal rescue, and he was listening intently. She said, the shelter is always looking for people to help with their website and marketing materials. I know you're amazing with design. Jake said, I'd love to help. We could go together this weekend, and I could meet the team. Sarah beamed at him and said, really? That would be amazing. I love that you want to get involved in things that matter to me. He kissed her forehead and said, I love that you care so much about helping animals. It's one of the many things I adore about you. I felt sick listening to this. He never talked to me like that, never seemed interested in my hobbies. I decided to go over and say hello. I walked up to them with my brightest smile and said, Jake. Sarah, what a surprise to see you here. Jake looked uncomfortable but said, "Hi, Jessica. How are you?" I said, "I'm doing great. You two look cozy." Sarah smiled and said, "Jessica, right? We met at Jake's company party last year. How's the marketing world treating you?" I said, "It's busy but good. I just got promoted to senior coordinator, actually." This was a lie, but I wanted to sound successful. Sarah said, "Congratulations." "That's wonderful." I said, "Thanks. So, how are things with you two? Still in the honeymoon phase?" I said, "That's sweet. You know, Jake, you look different, more confident or something." He said, "Thank you." I said, "It's funny how being with the right person can change someone. Mark always said I brought out the best in him. He used to say I challenged him to be more successful, more ambitious. Some people need that push, you know?" Sarah looked confused, but Jake's face darkened. He said, "Jessica, we should probably get back to our table." I said, "Oh, don't let me keep you. I just wanted to say hi. Sarah, you're lucky to have him. Jake's got a lot of potential." Sarah said, "I think he's pretty amazing as he is." As they walked away, I heard Sarah ask Jake, "What was that about?" And Jake said, "She's just being Jessica." I felt a surge of satisfaction that I'd managed to plant a seed of doubt. The rest of the party was fine until the very end, when something happened that I'm still trying to process. I was getting ready to leave when I saw Jake and Sarah by the coat check. They were standing close together, talking quietly, and then Jake said something that made Sarah laugh. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. Not just a peck, but a real kiss. When they broke apart, Jake said, "I love you, Sarah. You make me feel like the luckiest man in the world." Sarah said, "I love you too. You're everything I ever wanted." They looked at each other like they were the only people in the room. I stood there watching this display and felt something I wasn't expecting. Not jealousy exactly, but a kind of shocked realization. Jake looked at Sarah the way I'd always wanted him to look at me. And she looked at him like he was perfect exactly as he was. That's when it hit me. This whole time I'd been thinking Sarah was settling for Jake, but maybe it was the other way around. Maybe Jake was getting something with her that he'd never gotten with me. Maybe she saw something in him that I'd missed because I was too focused on what he wasn't, instead of appreciating what he was. Then, last Tuesday, something happened that changed everything. I was in the elevator at work when Sarah got on. We were alone, and I decided to try having a real conversation with her. I said, "Sarah, can I ask you something?" Woman to woman. She said, "Sure." I said, "Are you happy with Jake? I mean, really happy?" She looked surprised and said, "Of course I am." "Why would you ask that?" I said, "I just want to make sure you're not settling. Jake's a good guy, but he has some limitations." Sarah said, "What kind of limitations?" I said, "Well, he's not very ambitious career-wise. And there are some physical compatibility issues that might become problems down the road." Sarah stared at me for a moment. Then she said, "Jessica, I think you should know that Jake told me about your relationship. He told me how you used to compare him to your ex and make him feel inadequate. He told me about the comments you made about his body." I felt my face get hot. I said, "He's exaggerating. I was just trying to help him improve our relationship." Sarah said, "By telling him his penis was too small, by bringing up your ex constantly, by humiliating him in front of people." Sarah said, "Jake is the most caring, generous, thoughtful man I've ever been with. He makes me laugh every day. He listens to me, supports my goals, celebrates my successes. And yes, he satisfies me completely in every way. I can't imagine wanting anything different." I said, "But what about physically? Doesn't he seem small to you?" Sarah's face changed completely. She said, "I can't believe you just asked me that. What is wrong with you?" I said, "I'm just trying to understand what you see in him that I missed." Sarah said, "What I see in him is a man who treats me with respect and kindness. What I see is someone who makes me feel beautiful and valued and loved. If you couldn't see those things, that says more about you than it does about him." The elevator doors opened and I got out, but Sarah's words stayed with me. I kept thinking about what she'd said about Jake being emotionally intelligent and supportive. I realized that I'd never really appreciated those qualities in him. The next week, I ran into Jake at the coffee shop where we'd had our first date. He was alone, working on his laptop. I went over to his table and said, "Hi, Jake. Do you mind if I sit for a minute?" He looked uncomfortable but said, "I guess." I sat down and said, "I wanted to apologize for some things." He said, "Jessica, we don't need to do this." I said, "Yes, we do. I've been thinking about our relationship and I realize I made some mistakes." Jake said, "But it was never enough, was it? No matter what I did, you always found something wrong with it." I said, "I wasn't trying to find things wrong. I was trying to help you be the best version of yourself." Jake said, "The best version according to who? You? Mark?" Jake said every conversation became about how Mark was better, how Mark was bigger, how Mark was more successful. I started feeling like I was competing with a ghost. I said I didn't realize I was doing that. Jake said, "Really? You didn't realize you were comparing my dick to his every time we had sex?" I said, "I was trying to communicate about our physical compatibility." Jake said, "You were trying to make me feel inadequate." And it worked. I spent months feeling like I wasn't enough for you. Jake said, "It's too late for that. I'm with Sarah now, and she already appreciates me for who I am. I don't have to earn her love or prove my worth to her." As he got up to leave, I said, "Jake, do you think Sarah's settling for you?" He looked at me with something like pity and said, "Jessica, Sarah isn't settling for me. She's choosing me. Every day she chooses me. And I choose her. That's not settling, that's partnership." Since then, I've been watching Jake and Sarah from a distance, and I have to admit they seem genuinely happy together. They laugh a lot, they support each other's goals, they seem to genuinely enjoy each other's company. With Jake, I had someone who actually cared about my feelings and wanted to make me happy. But instead of appreciating that, I spent our entire relationship trying to turn him into Mark. I took his kindness for granted and focused on everything he wasn't instead of seeing everything he was. The hardest part to accept is that Jake is probably better off without me. Not because I'm a terrible person, but because we wanted different things from a relationship. I wanted someone to impress me and elevate my status. He wanted someone to love him and appreciate him. But I'll be honest, it still stings to see how happy Jake is with someone I consider ordinary. It challenges everything I thought I knew about relationships and what makes people attractive to each other. I realized that Jake never looked at me that way, not even in the beginning, and I never looked at him that way either. I was always evaluating him, measuring him, finding him lacking. Sarah just loves him. I still don't understand how someone like Sarah ended up with someone like Jake when someone like me is single. But maybe that's the point. Maybe I don't understand love as well as I thought I did. All I know is that Jake found someone who thinks he's perfect exactly as he is, and she found someone who appreciates her for who she is. They're both getting what they need from each other. I'm still single, still searching, still trying to figure out what went wrong. My friends think I should lower my standards, but I don't think that's the answer. I think I need to change what I'm measuring people against. Maybe the right person for me isn't someone who reminds me of Mark. Maybe it's someone who sees me the way Jake sees Sarah, like I'm already enough. Subscribe if you think some people mistake cruelty for honesty. Like if you've ever seen someone completely destroy their own relationship. Have you ever witnessed someone this oblivious to their own toxic behavior?